Okay, in 2 Corinthians 8, Paul talked about a grace that God gave the Macedonian churches. Now, do you know what the Macedonian churches are? They were the churches at Philippi, Philippians in the New Testament, and Thessalonica, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and Berea. Berea is where the Christians really examined the faith and then considered what they were going to do and follow Christ. Now, it sounds as if they were in a severe economic recession. When it says they were in verse 2, in the midst of a very severe trial. It's not certain, he's not clear as to what that trial is, but let's say it's an economic trial. I was serving the Hemet Church in Southern California when the great economic recession of 2008 hit. And I counted no less than 13 vacant houses within 2 blocks of my house, probably 6 months after the recession really got going well there. People were losing their houses right and left. It was a very difficult time. But in the midst of this recession in Macedonia, if that's what it was, Paul talked about God giving them grace. Now, grace, as you probably know, is unmerited favor, a gift, not earned. He said in verse 3 of chapter 8 of 2 Corinthians, not 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability, entirely on their own. They urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord's people, and they exceeded our expectations. They gave themselves first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God also to us. Now he says they gave beyond their ability. Now how could they do that? Paul explained that they gave themselves first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God also to us. Now, us in this context means a fund that was set up to support the church at Jerusalem, the mother church, that was going through a very severe persecution, kind of like the church in Ethiopia that we heard about earlier. So this was a mission gift that those churches in poverty would not benefit from. Are you with me now? So the people least likely to give to another troubled church are the people who are most severe. How could they give beyond their ability? I've been thinking about this. If they gave $10, okay, if all they had to give was $10, and they gave beyond their ability, so let's say $15, where's that extra $5 come from? From the grace of God. That's what grace is. Are you with me there? From the grace. The Macedonians first gave of themselves to the Lord, and by the will of God, God provided for them to give to someone else in need. That's a basic biblical principle. Now give what you have of yourself to God, and God will multiply that offering. You remember that story of the little boy with the fishes and the loaves, right? That wasn't just to entertain children in Sunday school while we're in here. That actually happened. That's a basic biblical principle. So Paul writes to the church at Corinth, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. That term, grace of giving, just pricked my interest this week. After last week's sermon about giving, I wondered if I really understood the grace of giving idea. So, I went through the whole process that I go through in giving to the Lord's work. Let me walk you through it, okay? Now, this is just me. My wife and I have separate incomes, and we have our own way of doing, of giving to the Lord. But this is me. So on a very basic level, I use an old-fashioned checkbook. Ever seen one of these? Because I'm an old-fashioned guy in some areas. Now, high-tech guys will just, have it automatically deducted from their account, or they'll do an online check to their church or something along that line. But I'm an old-fashioned guy when it comes to my offering to the church. I like to take a pen, and I like to take the check, and I like to write out on it Irvington Presbyterian Church, and I like to write the amount on it. It's kind of a little ceremony thing for me that I like to do. Well, then what do I do with the old-fashioned check that I write to the church? Well, I stick it in an old-fashioned offering envelope that has a number on it that was given to me by this church. I get a whole year's supply for every Sunday of the year, and it looks like this right here. Most of you have it, all right? So I take that check and I stick it in an old-fashioned envelope, and with my old-fashioned number on it, and then what do I do with it once it's all completed out? Okay, well, it seems like an easy task to me, right? You put it in the offering plate on Sunday morning. But you have to get it to the church first, right? So how do you get it to the church? How do I do it? I take my cell phone and I put my cell phone on the desk at home. I put my offering check on top of the cell phone. And since I rarely ever leave home without my phone, that means I'm probably not going to leave home without my check. Okay, now the easy part is done, right? Now I have to get it into the offering plate. So then I put it into my Bible, and the offering plate comes by, and I drop it in. Sometimes I forget it. What do I do then? Very simple. You can find somebody and give your offering envelope or your check to them. And so we get it there. All right, now, that's a simple part of the offering. Now here's the difficult challenge. How do I decide how much to write the check for? I have a simple system for that. This is my system, all right? I'm just sharing it with you. I take 10% of whatever you give me to take to the bank, all right? So you pay my insurance and you pay my retirement. It's called major medical. But you also give me a check for working up here. And so I take 10% of that check, and I write out a check, and I put it in the envelope. Now, 10% is a biblical standard, but not required in the New Testament. We now live by grace. But 10% is an easy number for me to compute, right? So, if you give me $100, it's $10. So write the check. Very, very nice. And I always give on the first Sunday of the month unless I forget. However, I have tied writing my offering check to paying my credit card bill. My credit card bill comes due by the first of the month, and so I hate writing a check for interest on a credit card bill. So I am absolutely not going to forget to write my check to the church. It's tied together, and I have a little notebook that I record whether I have actually written the checks to them or not, okay? Simple enough? That's my little simple brain system for giving to the Lord's work. There are lots of other ways to do it, but I like systems. I also have a system for reading the Bible. I don't just pick up the Bible and say, oh, what am I going to read today, Lord? That's an okay system too, but for me, I have to have a system. So I go to Bible Gateway. They give me 10 minutes of reading every day, and it takes me through the entire Bible in a year. I've been doing chronological reading for the last 3 years, so it's really neat. I also have a system to pray every day. I put a timer on my phone for 15 minutes every morning. I run it 15 minutes. It seems kind of rude to put a timer on God. I put the timer on because some mornings I really don't feel like praying. Some mornings I just, I say a word or two here and then it's gone. It's kind of like how I brushed my teeth before I got an electric toothbrush with a timer on it. I used to think, wow, I'm really brushed my teeth a long time. And it would be like 30 seconds. But I have this electric toothbrush that has a 2-minute timer on it. Wow, that 2 minutes seems like a long time some days. So the timer makes sure that I have 15 minutes and then I just focus. It's 15 minutes, allow God to just center me and get my thoughts going. See, I'm a systems person and systems work for me. And I know that if I want to change something about my behavior, I just need to build it into my lifestyle system and eventually get used to it. Humans are highly adaptable and you can change whatever it is that you want to change. So, but where is that grace giving that the Apostle Paul talked about? In the previous 6 churches I served, and this is my 7th, and oh God, I hope this is my last church, because it is time. 6 churches I have served. 10% of all contributions to most of those churches went to missionaries serving not for the benefit of that church, not this church, okay? Offerings to this church go to this church, not to missionaries, the general offerings. But you've been around here for very long, you know that we support a lot of missionaries. We support more missionaries than a church this size normally supports. I would call this a missions church. I'm impressed with it. So how do we do it if the money isn't coming out of our general fund? On our pledge card, do you have that in front of you? I got rid of all those pledge cards. On your pledge card, there is a place. And do you know how you get a pledge card in this church? And if you're listening on the internet, each November, there is we turn in a pledge card, and sometime in October it gets mailed to you, or early November, and you take it and you pray over it. But there's a box on this pledge card that says checked called tithe. Now remember, tithe technically means 10%. Next to tithe are 2 choices for us to fill out. What's your card say on there? Are there 2 choices? Are you looking down at your card? 2 choices? Look at your card now. One is for the IPC General Fund, and the other is for the Faith Promise for Missions. So of the 10% of my take-home salary that I commit to God's work through this church, I can decide what percentage will go to the general fund and what percentage goes to the Faith Promise for Missions. There are 2 places there. Once I submit a pledge card, then the church will give me a box of these envelopes that I talked about. One for an envelope for every Sunday of the year, okay? And even if you're just visiting with us, I want you to know this. If you're going to be here any kind of regular time, you can get one of these envelopes. It's not box envelopes. It's not just for members. And even if you watch on the internet and you don't have a church home to give to, just make this your church home for a while until you get connected somewhere. So, of the 10% that of my take-home salary, I can commit to God's work through this church. I can decide what percentage will go to the general fund. So once I submit a pledge card and I get these offering envelopes, on the envelope there is a place to mark what percentage goes where. So I can write the amount on general fund, missions, building fund, deacons, or other. I've been here a year and a half. I've been using these envelopes for a year and a half. I never looked at that writing on that envelope. All I did was write my name on it. And I don't know why I wrote my name on it, because if you open the check, my name is on there. Plus, it has a number on the envelope, so the counters even know whose it is. But I never even noticed those on there. So this matter has given me a fit over the last week. I have struggled with this thing. How do I decide what percentage goes to missions? I'm a systems person. I have to have a system. So I began with the question on Monday. What is really this thing called faith promise? Okay, are you with me here? What is this thing called faith promise? See, when I was a new Christian in high school, a long time ago, I started attending a large non-denominational church, and they practiced faith promise giving. And they raised a lot of money from missionaries, and they sent a lot of people on the mission field. My sister, whom you met a couple of weeks ago, she was one of those who received mission funds for her work in China. And so I participated in this faith promise giving process while I was there. This is how I understood how faith promised to work in those days. I was a young Christian. I would pray about supporting our missionaries and ask God, what amount do you want me to give to this? Now let's say that I discerned that I have the faith to believe God would provide $10 a month. $10 a month. Okay, I can do that. All right. Over and above my monthly tithe from the little jobs I had at the time. $10 a month to go to missions. That was huge for me then. Realized I was a struggling San Jose City College student at the time, and it was a long time ago. So, how might that $10 come in? I've pledged this over and above my tithe. One day, I'll give you just a couple of examples. I was cleaning out behind the seat of my truck. And there I found a $10 bill. Now I figured that I went to buy gas and I had a $20 bill and I gave the clerk $20 and they gave me a 10 back because I probably gassed my truck up for $10. I told you it was a long time ago. Okay, I got $10. Give it to the missionary. Great. Then a neighbor said, hey, can you take out some bushes for me? Hey, this is mid-1970s wages, all right? $10, here you go. Wow, I didn't expect to earn $10. Take the $10 and give it to the mission funds. See, faith promise is different than a tithe. A tithe is 10% of what I've earned. And actually, it's not necessarily 10%. We give a percentage, 10%, 12%, 15%, whatever you feel like giving. That's percentage giving. Tithing is percentage giving. Faith promise is over and above your tithe. So our own missions, IPC missions handbook, which is really good, it's coming out very, very soon. You'll be impressed with it. It says this about faith promise. It is not a pledge, commitment from existing financial resources alone. It is a voluntary contribution separate from any pledge of general giving for the church. So let's say you're on a fixed income. So where is the extra money going to come from besides finding $10 bills in the back of your pickup truck? All right? One suggestion that we've talked about is making a sacrifice for the mission of Christ and cutting back on something. So let's say you go out to dinner once a month, or once a week rather. Let's say you cut back 1 week going out to dinner. Let's say it costs you $30 for a meal. That doesn't buy you a whole lot today, but let's just say it's $30. That's $30 and you go home and you eat soup instead. Okay, that's $30, or let's subtract the price of the soup and and whatnot. So maybe let's say it's $25 to missions every month. That's one way. Let's say you have an artistic talent and you make something to sell. The profit after expenses goes to Faith Promise for missions. Now here's why I like Faith Promise giving for a church instead of taking a percentage of the Sunday offering and giving it to missions. You see, I've been in churches where the offerings have gone down, especially when you're in the midst of a terrible economic recession. What's the first area that gets cut? The first area gets cut. The pastor's salary? Oh no. The electricity? Oh no. Building maintenance? Oh no. First thing that gets cut, tell me. Missions. Very first thing that gets cut. And we take care of ourselves. The second reason I like Faith Promise giving for missions is because it leaves room for God to do some miraculous things in our lives. See, as Christians in America, we're not asked to make many sacrifices for Christ, are we? It's pretty comfortable here. It's sort of become like a religion of convenience. For God to do such a work in our life where we'll sacrifice something to support a missionary, that can be powerful in our life. Then to hear how God has blessed us as a result of that sacrifice, man, that can be life-changing for those who don't participate and for those who participate. So here's how it works here. Once a month, on the third Sunday, which was today, we have what we call Mission Sunday. We spend about 5 minutes hearing a report about one of the missionaries or mission projects that we support. I appreciate that, okay? We have a little insert in the bulletin each month that talks about a mission project and so forth. It's really good. You know what I would really like to hear? I told the missions committee this last week. I'd really like to hear some stories of people who took the challenge of supporting our missionaries and God came through for them. So let's say you sitting right there in a pew. Let's say you commit today to, shall I say $25? Is that enough? Or is that too much? Let's say you commit $25 for missions over and above your giving. And you say, I don't know how that $25 is going to come in. I have absolutely no money and no means to do this sort of thing. But you commit to that $25 a month. And then you watch and you see in the first month if an extra $25 doesn't come in. And then it miraculously comes in and you write that down. Okay, you give it to the church. Then the next month this happens again, but maybe in a different way. Maybe somehow you find money on the ground or something, and you write that down. And then you got some stories of God working. Now here's my suggestion. We want to get to grace giving. And grace giving starts by first giving your life to the Lord. You do that in prayer by inviting Jesus to come to be the Lord of your life. Then you ask God a simple question. How much, God, can I give monthly to support missions in 2016 over and above my percentage giving to this church? What can I support? What can I sacrifice to give to missions? Okay, look at me now. If you look at me, how do you feel about that question? You can excel at grace giving through faith promise giving because you will see money that you otherwise would never have seen. So who's up to the challenge?